In the second section of the Ohio State University Nighsonger Center Echo on the role of direct support professionals, we'll hear from Devin Conklin, a clinical behavior specialist with Nighsonger Center's clinical support services, who will be discussing the value of teamwork between the individual direct support professionals and other team members in supporting those with intellectual and developmental disabilities and mental health conditions. Today's learning objectives, we would like all participants be able to define person-centered planning and identify key team members, identify barriers and describe strategies to support effective communication amongst diverse team members, to describe how to build positive relationships to support communication, and to identify ways that DSPs can advocate for their clients' rights and needs. So at this time, I welcome Devin to the stage.
Thank you, Andrew. Let me share my screen. All right. So as Andrew said, I'm Devin Conklin. I'm a clinical behavior specialist here at the OSU Nighsonger Center. So we wanted to start with person-centered planning. This is a phrase you probably hear a lot as a DSP or in a management role, but I think sometimes we hear all of these phrases and we never really stop to ask or have time to ask, what does that mean? So person-centered planning means that the voice of the individual is leading the planning of the services and supports that they are receiving. We want to be thinking about what the person wants and not what we want for them. Sometimes what we maybe think is best is not what they want, and we really want their services and supports to reflect, their wants, their needs, their goals. We want to focus on the individual's strengths. So obviously in a service plan, we're also discussing, what does this person need to in a daily life or to help reach their goals, or maybe to, provide some behavior supports or mental health supports. But we also want to focus on what the person is good at. And a lot of times we can start by looking at what are they good at to see how we can use those strengths to help them in areas where they maybe need a little bit more support. We want to focus on what is important to the person and how do they like to be helped. It does not help if we are providing support that they don't want or they don't need, or we're doing it in a way that frustrates them or makes them feel, it creates that tension between staff and the individual. So we want to make sure we're supporting them in the way they want to be helped. This information can all be found in the person's Ohio Individualized Service Plan, or the OISP. And it is, a lengthy document, but it does include, how does the person like help in this certain area? What's important to them? What are their strengths? And so we really encourage DSPs to look over that document and familiarize themselves with the person's supports. So another term I think we use a lot. What are services and supports? I think we say this a lot to DSPs, oh, it's in their services, it's in their supports, but maybe we don't always do a good job of defining what that is. So services and supports are programs and resources being used by the individual. So this could be, the day program they attend, or the work coaching that they're getting. It could be, the counseling that they're receiving. So it's any of the services that they are receiving. The services and supports are also instructions on how to best help this individual. And everybody is unique. So we want to make sure that we're not, we may need to talk to one person differently than we talk to another person. So we really want to focus on this person's individual supports. And then there are also a list of important people, places, and things. So in that document, you're also going to find who is important to this person. Maybe it's their family, and then for somebody else, maybe it's, a really good friend they've had their whole life. What are important places to them? They really like to go to this specific park, or they love this certain restaurant. And then what things are important to them. So this could be, activities they enjoy. It could be physical items that are important to them. It could be routines, but all of that information is really important in how we interact with the person. And it really should be the guide for how a DSP is able to do their job. So the role of the DSP is to provide that daily support to the individual based on their OISP. We want to make sure that we're helping the individual with their goals. And so that's also part of that ISP. It's going to define some goals for the individual and then some action steps on how you as a DSP can help support that person in reaching their goals. And the most important part of person-centered planning is obviously the person, but I think the second most important people are the DSPs. You guys are the ones that are working with individuals every day. You know them very well, and we want to hear from DSPs as part of that planning. And oftentimes DSPs can really be that additional advocate and voice for their individual because they know them so well, and they're able to say, hey, they really don't like when we say this certain word, or that it's really important to them that we do this, activity every Sunday. And so that's where we really want to hear from those DSPs. I think another term we throw out a lot is the team. Talk to the team. We got to make a team decision, but we may not always know who is that team. So I'm going to give kind of a broad overview of what generally teams look like, but each individual, may have a few additional members or, less, but it's going to be individual specific. But generally, an individual has a county board representative. This is, their service coordinator, their SSA. This is the person that's putting together that ISP document. It's the person collecting that information and kind of organizing those supports and services. People may have a day program, a school, or a work program that they're involved in. Obviously, kids are going to have more of the school involvement, and then adults are having more of that day program or work opportunity. Most people are going to have some type of health care. I would also put, mental health and maybe some behavior supports here in that healthcare and counseling piece. Most adults are going to have a guardian, and this may be family or this may be a court-appointed guardian or an agency, but there likely is going to be that guardian piece. And then in addition, there may also be family. So some people may have a court-appointed guardian and some family that's involved. Some people may have a family guardian, but I kind of put those together as one. And then where the DSP comes in is that provider agency. So the provider that is giving the services to the individual in their home setting. And that's the key piece that we're going to be discussing today is how do providers communicate with all of these other team members, and how do we really help that communication. So communication is absolutely the key to success, and I'm sure we hear that a lot, but again, how do we put that into action? So it's really important that we're talking to the people that we're supporting. We're getting to know them. We understand what they like, what they don't like, what they're good at, what they need help with. We're talking to them about their day, all the little things too. So it's really important that you're talking and building that relationship with the individual that you're supporting. Sometimes you may be supporting someone who is not a vocal communicator, but most of the time people still understand everything we're saying. And it's really important that we're having those conversations and we're saying, hey, this is what we're going to be doing next, and that we're having those conversations and keeping them as part of that team. Talk to your supervisor about your role. If you ever have questions about what you're supposed to be doing as a DSP, what supports you're supposed to be offering, or something changes and you're unsure, it's really important that you're able to have that communication with your supervisor, your manager, and getting those answers, or even maybe if they don't know, they're able to take it to the team and say, hey, this thing changed and we're not sure what we're supposed to do now. Ask people if you need help, and let people know if things aren't working. So as a behavior specialist, I am often part of these teams, but I'm not in the home every day. I visit, but I'm not able to be there every day. So I really like to talk to DSPs and hear what's working, what's not working, because you guys are in the home every day. So your voice is important and we want to hear from you. We talked last week about writing incident reports and sharing information with healthcare providers. And again, this is really important where DSPs are recognizing, hey, something is different with my individual. This incident occurred and this is not normal for them. And I think, the team needs to know. So communicating with those incident reports is really important. And it's that documentation that we have to then, take to a doctor and say, hey, things aren't, going so well at home, or there's these changes that have been happening. Talk to team members when you see them. So, behavior specialists, service coordinators, guardians, families, all of these people may stop by from time to time, and we do want to hear from you. So, feel free to talk with us. I always want to hear from the DSPs, and I'm sure other team members do too, because you really know the person. I also recognize that sometimes there might not be that opportunity. If the individual is present and you're like, it's not going to be a good time to share this information because, we shouldn't be talking about the person in front of them, or you may feel nervous to talk to this guardian because you don't know them that well. We still want to hear from you. So, if you can share that information with your supervisor and they can share it with the other team members, if you can send an email or write a statement. I had a DSP a couple months ago write a really thoughtful statement to the team. And she was like, hey, some of these things are not incident reports, but I just wanted you to know that things have changed. And these are some things I'm seeing from my individual. And that statement really helped us make some changes to the support. So we do want to hear from you, even if it's not talking. We'd love to hear from you in email or in written statements. Why is communication so hard? Oftentimes there's limited time with team members, especially as DSPs. You're probably only seeing people in passing if they're coming to visit, or maybe you're taking your individual to a meeting or an appointment. So there's not always that time to sit down and have those conversations, or maybe there's not the time for the privacy. If the individual is there and we're not going to have that, difficult conversation in front of them, there's just not always that opportunity. It can be hard when there's lots of staff changes. The turnover of DSPs is quite high. I'm sure that you guys feel that. And it can be really hard to have that communication when there's constantly new people and you're like, well, I don't know who I'm supposed to be talking to. That can be challenging. It's also challenging as a DSP. If you work, in the morning, you may never see the person that works at night. Or if you only work during the week, you don't see the person that works on the weekend. So again, there's just not that opportunity. We all have different communication styles. And so sometimes, things can get lost because I may, prefer to speak in person, whereas somebody else needs to see it in writing to understand and remember it. And so sometimes those different communication styles mean that, information is kind of getting lost. Your individuals may be verbal or nonverbal communicators. And so sometimes that's hard, right? We feel this challenge of, I'm not sure how to, give this information to my individual, or they're not able to share fully with me, how they're feeling or, what's going on. And so that can be a challenge until we get to know how they're able to communicate with us. Sometimes there can be language differences. We have different, context or different meanings to words, and it can be difficult to communicate with each other, or we may misunderstand what's being said, and that can sometimes be a challenge. And then unclear roles and expectations. So I think sometimes too, when we have really large teams, everybody's kind of like, I'm not sure what my role is in this team, and I'm not sure if I should speak up right now or I should say something. And so then, people don't say anything. And so really defining those roles and expectations can be important so that all team members know, what their job is to support this individual, and they feel confident in speaking up and communicating with other team members. And remembering that communication is more than words. So I think a lot of times we think it's just what do we say, but it's more than that. Being aware of your tone of voice and volume is so important. It's one of the things that the individuals that I serve say most often is, my staff yell at me, or they were angry with me. And really the person was maybe just speaking loud, or the tone of voice came across as if they were angry, but that's not the words they were saying. So oftentimes when I'm doing trainings, I say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So being aware of your tone of voice, that you sound calm, that you're using, an inside volume, because that way the people are responding more to what you're saying and not to how it feels. We also want to be mindful of our body language. Oftentimes when we're in these crisis situations, our body is reacting in that same way. And so we're going to tense up and our faces are going to scrunch up. But that comes across to the individual we're communicating with as, we're scared, we're angry. And so they're going to react to those physical signs in our bodies as well. And so we want to make sure we're aware of what our body is putting off to them, and that we're kind of maybe relaxing our face, we're relaxing our body when we're communicating, because I may be saying something like calm down, but if I look like this, I also don't look calm. It's important for us as people supporting other people to be good listeners. Sometimes individuals just need to be heard. They just need to, vent about their day, or they need to, just get it off of their chest. And so we want to make sure that we're being supportive listeners and that we're not always trying to solve their problem. Maybe that is what the individual wants, but we can find that out by being a good listener and saying, I hear you right now. Do you want some help or do you want me to just listen? But that's really key. Being open to offering ideas to your individual or to team members and say, hey, we've been noticing this behavior at home. What do you think if we tried, they're having a hard time getting up. What do you think about if we try to schedule? And then be open to that feedback though. I think sometimes when we give an idea, our feelings can be hurt if the idea isn't, received well. And so being open to that feedback and being able to work together as part of that team to come up with the best supports for that individual. And then always ask questions. I absolutely love it when I do site visits with my individuals and DSPs ask a question. Hey, what would you do in this situation? Or can you tell me more about what this part of the ISP says? I don't quite understand it. We learn when we ask questions, and we would always rather ask questions and answer them than people kind of make guesses. So don't be afraid to ask those questions when team members are around. I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about relationships. We talked a lot about this last week when, how can a DSP support their individual in a mental health situation and how can they kind of advocate with the healthcare provider? And we talked a lot about that relationship, right? And the individual is going to feel safer if they have a good relationship with their DSP. So I wanted to think about that relationship again and pose it as a couple of questions, because it's not just the relationship with your individual, it's also that relationship with the team. So thinking about, do you take advice from strangers or from somebody you know, right? We're much more likely to talk to somebody and take advice and help from people we know. So getting to know your individual is going to open that opportunity for them to, listen to you and take your advice. Think about the people that you trust in your life and why do you trust them? So we want to build that same kind of relationship with the individual and with their team members. How do we build that trust and that communication? Would you want a stranger helping you get dressed or helping you with some of those very, personal things throughout your day? We're asking DSPs to do that for individuals. And so remembering that if you want the individual to work with you, you need to have that good relationship so they feel safe and they feel like they can trust you when you're having to perform those, very personal tasks. Thinking about it from, maybe a family or a guardian perspective, would you want to know who's in your house at night, or would you want to know who's helping, your child? So sometimes, families or guardians or even behavior specialists, SSAs, we may ask questions of you guys, and it's not to be rude. It's not to think that you're not doing your job. It's just, as a parent, you'd want to know who's working with your child. And so sometimes people may be asking you those questions because they also, that relationship's important to them too, that relationship with you, and then the relationship you have with their, their child or their loved one. And then who do you talk to when you're upset? When we're having a bad day, we all like to talk to somebody. And so thinking about who that person is in your life and why you talk to them can kind of help frame that relationship you're trying to have with your individual, right? How can you help them feel safe and supported so they feel comfortable talking to you if they're having a difficult time? So how do we build those relationships? We need to get to know the people that we're working with. We need to talk to them about their day. If we're only talking to our individuals to say, get up, get dressed, take your medicine, that doesn't feel like, a relationship. And so we want to make sure we're asking, how was your day program today? Tell me about that art project you worked on. I know you were excited about that, right? We're having conversations about those little things in their life as well. Doing things together is huge. So I mentioned this last week. There's a big difference, right, between watching your individual do an activity and then actually doing it together. So we're sitting there together and we're making a craft, or we're doing a puzzle, we're cooking dinner together. That just gives you those opportunities to get to know each other and build that trust. And taking some interest in what they like can go a long way. You don't have to love every activity that they do, but you can show enough interest. So I have individuals that love sports. I'm a sports fan in a small sense. I enjoy having the Buckeyes on in the fall, but I will sit and talk to these individuals about sports, even though I may not know all the things they know. I take an interest in the conversations they like to have. It's super important to introduce yourself on your first day and when you meet team members. So, thinking about in your own home, would you want to wake up and have a stranger sitting in your living room? It'd be really awkward. So making sure that we're introducing ourselves to the individual, we're introducing ourselves when new team members come over, and team members should be doing that to you too, right? Giving that respect and introducing themselves to you. Um, Talking with family when they visit is a great way to build that relationship with family. And again, it can just be those small interactions of, hi, how are you? And sharing good news. So many times, we're talking about what does the person, what different help do they need? What hasn't been going well? What do we need to change? But we also need to focus on the good things. So I talked in the beginning in person-centered planning, we want to talk about a person's strengths. We also want to share the good news. Hey, they did so awesome the other day. They were really stressed because they couldn't find their wallet, but we worked together and we found it and we made it, to work on time. So sharing that good news is also really important, and helps build that relationship as well. And then advocating for your clients. So if you were with us last week, we talked a lot about this, where DSPs can share that information, maybe with their supervisors or with healthcare professionals. But so many times DSPs really know the individual so well. They know what the person wants, what they need, what they don't like, what's not going well. And if the individual is not able to share that information, or maybe they don't feel confident sharing that in a team setting, maybe they feel overwhelmed, it can be really helpful for DSPs to share that information. So first and foremost, speaking up if something seems wrong. If you're like, hey, something has really changed with my individual and this just does not feel right, telling your supervisor, sharing that information so that we can start asking questions and looking into, what has changed for this person, what other new help may they need. Writing incident reports and communicating any kind of changes in behavior or routines is so important. So in some of the symptoms we talked about last week with mental health concerns, you may see somebody not having interest in things they used to really enjoy, or you may see that, they're not able to get up and complete their morning routine like they normally did. Or maybe they're really, really nervous about something that's coming up and they're just not able to move on from it, and it's just kind of consuming them. So any of those kind of changes are really important to communicate, again, through an incident report or in communication with your manager, so that can be shared with other team members or with healthcare professionals. I think that house meetings can be such a helpful tool. I think pre-COVID, these happened a lot more often, but COVID changed a lot of things, and it can be very challenging to get all of the staff together in one place. But when all of the staff can sit down together and kind of share their experiences or what's working for them, what's not working for them, that can be really helpful, to make sure that all of the staff that are working with an individual are kind of on the same page, they're doing the same things, they're offering that consistent support. And then you can support each other and saying, hey, I hear you. It is really challenging every night to, get dinner made and help this person. Let's think together about how we could maybe change that and do better. So that it's also there to support you guys. Ask for more training. The experiences like this are awesome. Asking for more training from your supervisors on the person's, ISP or their behavior supports or their coping skills. Asking for more information is helpful, and I think it offers you guys an opportunity to also, ask questions of the team members and get that information you need. And I've said it about 100 times in this, but it's so important, is we really do want to hear from DSPs. We want to hear your thoughts, and we want you to be able to share those with the team. So whether that's communicating with your manager that may go to team meetings, or it's, sharing an email with people, or talking to the team members when you see them at the house or at appointments. But we really do want to hear from DSPs, because you know the individuals so well. You're there every day. And so we want you to feel, able to speak up and share those thoughts. Just a couple of references here on my presentation. I will hand it back over to Andrew.
Thanks, Devin, for sharing all that. I know some of that at times may seem commonplace, the basics of communication, but great reminders of active listening, and having that communication extend into networks of the different team members who have multiple perspectives on how best to support the individual that they're serving. I want to open it up to some questions from the audience. If you have a question for Devin or for the team, now's the time to raise your hand, or you can unmute yourself. You can feel free to type a question in the chat as well if you have one. And while we're waiting for that, one thing that we may all be aware of as well is that family involvement is so key to effective transition, whether it be in education, employment, or independent living goals. And, I'm wondering, Devin, if you have strategies or advice when it comes to a lack of family involvement, who can take that place, or what is the role of professionals and other team members to fill that gap if we're having family missing, or in some cases, maybe if there's conflicting interests with guardians and family members. Any advice on that?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Andrew, because I do think, at least in my work, a lot of people do not have that family involvement, that natural support, or maybe it's pretty limited. And so I think when we have team members that are consistent and are with somebody for an extended period of time, the individual is able to make those connections with a service coordinator, a provider, a day program staff, those people that can kind of be like mentors, be that listening ear, give them that advice, that encouragement. It is not the same as family, but I think we often find that individuals do feel, that connection and that support from their team when people are consistent in coming to meetings and consistent in having that contact with individuals, and people, stay involved in that person's supports. I do think that people can feel that connection to their team members. And then sometimes it's peers too. I have some individuals that make really great peer connections and find that to be really supportive. And then you have some people that make these great natural supports, and maybe you know church or social groups that they find outside of a day program or something, and sometimes those people kind of take that family role as well.
Thanks, Devin. We had a question in the chat actually posed back out to the group from Kelly, and she's wondering, for the DSPs here, what is the best way you have found to communicate with the team? Is there something that would help you that the team could do to get your input? Any brave souls out there today that would like to take a try at answering that for us? Best ways that you've found communicating with the team, or something that would help you be more involved with the team or in sharing your input?
Hi.
Hi, Denise.
Hi. I've been with the same client for 19 years, and we've had a lot of DSPs come and go, as many people can probably understand. But I think the biggest thing for our group, we have a group of just 3 people for our client, and leaving post-it notes or having a text chain between us as well as the client's mother is extremely helpful. And I think it kind of breaks down that barrier, gets a little more personal with all of us, so that we can say, hey, this was a really tough day and this is what happened and what advice do you have? Because even being with the same person for 19 years, there's still some days where it's difficult, to transition behaviors, or, we might be having a bad day and we have each other to lean on. I think that we've just become friends. And first and foremost, we want everybody to know that we're all at the same level. Even though I've been with him for so long and someone else may have only been with him for like 2 years, we're all in that same boat together as a team for our client. And we want that understanding with everybody, that it's nothing to take personal. If you're having a bad day, let's talk about it. And I think everybody feels like they're on the same level together. Nobody feels inferior, because we've had to go through that before with a new person thinking, this is my fault. What did I do wrong? And we're like, it's not like that. It's everybody has to communicate and be on the same page and be here as one.
Thanks, Denise.
I don't know if that kind of helps her question or not, but you really have to be close knit with each other to do the best care you can for your individual.
Yeah, no, thanks, Denise. I appreciate that. Even with the longevity of service, with new team members coming and going and needing to adapt to change, day to day, year by year, that's really helpful advice. Someone else had mentioned emails. I know you had mentioned a group thread where you're texting back and forth. I see Tanya maybe has something to add as well, and then we'll go to Christopher. Tanya?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I do agree with what I do have a monthly staff meeting because every shift does not necessarily work together, so they may not see each other. So I have a monthly staff meeting, and we do have a team chat. And also communicating when the shifts are changing, the communication log, going over that with the oncoming shift, what went on your shift. If first shift is leaving out, second shift is coming on, they communicate with each other versus just reading a piece of paper. There's, that opportunity to communicate with each other, let each other know really, how everything went, how the residents were, what kind of day they're having, anything, because a lot of things get missed in the communication log. So they may not write down the little things, but if you are literally talking to each other, explaining what you're saying in the communication log, it helps to build relationships with the DSPs, building relationships with each other.
Thanks, Tanya. Yeah, streamlining that service or the transition from service between shifts is really critical, and explaining that importance again of communication and coming together. Someone else had mentioned having meetings to make sure you're on the same page. At Sunshine Communities, we use an online chat that staff can view and text in. So kind of balancing out the text-based communication, but also, verbally connecting based in between shifts is important. Christopher?
Yeah, I was a DSP when I first started in this field. Was a home manager for a while. It to me, it wasn't what we used, whether it's a communication book or a staff book or email or text. Those all work great. What I found that was better though was being consistent about it, choosing one that works for everybody and staying consistent with it. That way, Bob's using text and I'm using a book, and this person's sending emails. The communication doesn't go anywhere from there. So picking one and being consistent with it. But also, what's the expectation of your staff to use those communication tools? Do you have to work on those daily? Do you have to send something out every day or every week? And how long will it be before the manager takes all the information and then passes it on and makes sure it gets reiterated out to the rest of the staff? In some of my homes that I've worked in, emails just wasn't going to be there. I had some older people that worked in my homes, and that wasn't their thing. They weren't exactly tech savvy. So working in a staff to staff book, but just sticking with something consistently and knowing what the expectation is from your staff so that they use them.
Thanks, Christopher, for explaining that. Also in the chat, some other people have said they invite our lead staff to the ISP meetings and using progress notes as software for staff to fill out after their shifts to inform the next shift. So again, that transition period and what they've done for the day can also be important if an incident has taken place. I see Jumi also had something to add. Jumi?
Yes, hello everyone. How you doing? In addition to what everybody said, I believe communication is the number one key. And number two, for my individual, if I have new people coming in for training, we try as much as possible to keep the same pattern because she doesn't like her routine to be changed. So we have to follow our routine. So that is the very important thing. We let them know that, hey, this is the pattern, this is our routine. Don't come in and change anything because that will make her have a behavior for that day. For example, she's not a morning person. If she has appointment, I'm gonna try as possible to keep that appointment maybe later in the day instead of early in the morning because that will change our behavior for that day. I don't know, maybe that makes sense.
It does. And I think you bring up an important point about how sudden changes or disruptions to routines can cause behavioral issues, and something for us just to be aware of. And again, how this communication is streamlining communication of service between shifts is so important. So I appreciate you sharing that as well. As a last note here, and then we'll move into our case study for today. Elise mentions, as a manager, I round every day to check on my staff and individuals, and they're able to share issues and concerns. We also use Teams to communicate, and help desk to various departments that offer support. And Jim also adds, would like to add good training on proper documentation, keeps everything working smoothly. This way the little things don't get missed. So yeah, there's a lot of great strategies and solutions and communication tools that have been shared out through this. So I want to thank Devin for the presentation, and the community for their active participation and kind of emphasizing some of those key points today. Great conversation. Let's keep it